I still get chills thinking about the moment I caught her on camera. I'm Jake, a 32-year-old mechanic who'd finally scraped together enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom in Pinewood Estates. After years of grinding at Carter's auto shop, I thought I'd landed in a nice, tight-knit community with a pool and tennis courts to boot. What the realtor conveniently left out was Lydia Harper, the 5-term HOA president who ruled the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. I met her the day I moved in, barely done hauling boxes when she showed up at my door, clutching a binder thicker than a phone book labeled Pinewood Estates Bylaws and Standards. Her blonde bob screamed, "I need to speak to the manager," and her pastel sweater seemed out of place in the July heat. "Welcome to Pinewood," she said, eyeing the grease on my hands and my Ford F-150 parked in the driveway, its Carter's auto logo gleaming. Section 8.2 states commercial vehicles must be garaged or parked off-site, and you'll need to submit a request for that. Wind chime thing. She pointed to a wrench-shaped wind catcher my dad made me, mistaking it for some tacky decoration. I didn't argue, just took the binder and promised to read it, figuring I'd keep the peace. That was my first mistake. Over the next 6 months, Lydia became my personal nightmare. Violation notices arrived like clockwork. My grass was a half-inch too tall, my mailbox was midnight blue instead of the approved navy, my garden hose was an aesthetic disruption. Each came with her signature and a thinly veiled jab that I'd be happier in a less regulated neighborhood. I complied when it made sense, ignored the rest, and that only seemed to light a fire under her. She'd linger outside my house, noting my comings and goings. If I had buddies from the shop over for beers, she'd swing by the next morning, preaching about noise rules. When I worked on my project car in the garage, door open to catch a breeze, she'd stroll by, snapping photos like a private investigator. Once, she dragged the HOA treasurer to lecture me about my tomato plants violating some non-native species rule, only for the treasurer to sheepishly admit tomatoes were fine. I tried to play nice, attended meetings, paid dues on time, even volunteered for the community garden, but nothing softened Lydia's vendetta. Then, 2 months ago, something weird started happening. My truck's gas gauge kept showing less fuel than it should. At first, I chalked it up to bad memory or a fuel line issue. But after a week of tracking every mile, I knew someone was stealing my gas. The question was who and why. I brought it up at an HOA meeting, hoping for allies. Anyone else dealing with gas theft? My truck's been hit a few times lately. Before anyone could answer, Lydia cut in, her voice dripping with smugness. This is why commercial vehicles don't belong in driveways. They attract trouble. She scanned the room for nods, but most neighbors just shifted awkwardly. Later, Tom from 2 doors down pulled me aside in the parking lot, glancing around like he was in a spy MOVY. "I've had the same problem," he whispered. "My sedan's been near empty twice this month, even after a fill-up. Thought I was losing it. That's when I decided to get serious. I installed a motion-activated camera overlooking my driveway, angled to catch anyone near my truck. The first 2 nights were quiet, but on the third, at 5:32 a.m., the camera pinged. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, heart pounding, and watched the footage. There was Lydia, in pricey running gear, casually strolling up with a garden hose and a gas can. She glanced around, then siphoned fuel from my tank, her face clear as day, a smug little smirk curling her lips as she filled her container. I was livid, but I kept my cool. This wasn't just about a few gallons of gas, it was 6 months of her trying to run me out of my own home. I needed a plan. 2 days later, the camera pinged again, same time. This time I was ready. I slipped on my shoes, grabbed my phone, and crept onto my porch just as Lydia was mid-theft, hose in hand. "Morning, Lydia," I said, voice steady, already recording. "What's with the hose in my gas tank?" She didn't even blink, just stood up, gas dripping, and flashed that patronizing smile I'd grown to hate. "Good morning, Jake," she chirped, like we were chatting over coffee. "Lovely day for a walk, isn't it?" I held up my phone. "Cut the crap. You're stealing my gas." She tilted her head, like I was a kid who didn't get it. "Oh, this?" Per Section 11.3 of our bylaws, community members share resources. Your truck's been sitting for 3 days. Clearly, you're not using the fuel, and I have an urgent meeting across town. I couldn't believe by now neighbors were peeking out, drawn by the commotion. Lydia tried to rally them, but the gas can and hose made her look like a crook caught red-handed. When Officer Daniels arrived, she pulled out a highlighted copy of the bylaws from her purse apparently. She carried it everywhere and shoved it at him, pointing to Section 11.3. Daniels skimmed it and shook his head. "Ma'am, this covers community property like parks. It doesn't let you take someone's gas. But as president, I have authority to interpret. You don't have authority to steal," he said, voice firm. I showed him the footage. Lydia's face, the hose, the smirk, timestamps from both nights. Her excuses unraveled. "It's a misunderstanding," she stammered. "Jake said countless violations. I was making a point about standards. By stealing his gas?" Daniels asked, eyebrow raised. "I was going to replace it. My car was empty, and I had an important meeting." Daniels exchanged a look with his partner. "Ma'am, turn around. Hands behind your back." Lydia's jaw dropped. "You're arresting me? Do you know who I am? My husband golfs with Judge Carter." But the cuffs clicked on, and Daniels read her rights as she sputtered. "I paid a lot, $200 a month in fees. I've been president for 5 years. You'll regret this, Jake." Neighbors gathered, some shocked, others hiding grins, as Lydia, the terror of Pinewood Estates, was led to the cruiser. She made one last plea to the crowd. "This is what happens when we allow commercial vehicles. Property values will tank. The Community Assets Clause says resources are shared." Her voice cut off as the cruiser door slammed, but through the window, I could see her still ranting. In the days that followed, the neighborhood buzzed. Tom admitted he'd lost 20 gallons over a month. Sarah across the street had started logging her fuel after 3 empty tanks. Even the HOA treasurer, Mark, confessed he'd gotten a locking gas cap after similar issues. The district attorney hit Lydia with multiple counts of petty theft, trespassing, and filing false violations to harass me. The VY Deo, neighbors' testimonies, and her own bizarre resource-sharing defense made the case airtight. At her hearing, she stuck to her story, claiming she was just doing her duty as president. The judge wasn't VYing it. 6 months probation, Dulaw 1,500 in restitution, 100 hours of community SARE VYC, and best of Allah 5-year ban from any HOA board. When the sentence dropped, Lydia gasped, clutching the table. 5 years? The board elections are next month. I've already printed the flyers. Pinewood hasn't been the same since. Lydia's reign of terror is over, and neighbors are finally talking, comparing stories, even laughing about the absurdity of it all. For me, it's bittersweet. I just wanted a home, not a war with a gas-stealing HOA tyrant. But watching that cruiser drive off, with Lydia still yelling about bylaws, that's a VY Tory I'll never forget.